And so in a lot of ways, you're more qualified than anyone coming out of a teacher certification program, because what they're taught in a teacher certification program is basically like a coach.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with Tanya Charlton, Paul Schaefer, and guest Mr. Oh my gosh, I blanked on your last name. Can we start over? It was coming out of my mouth and I was like, I'm losing it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with Paul Schaefer, Tanya Charlton, and I think new guest, Mr. Hunter Burnett.
That's right.
Welcome, Hunter.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Hunter serves in our schools division under Miss Kathy Becker, and you oversee the Southeast region. So our schools there, schools of all kinds, cottage schools,
That's right.
larger operations, and you also consult with families who want to start schools or who just have questions about what's going on where they live in terms of classical education.
That's right. My region's basically Kentucky and Virginia, as far north as you can go, and then south as Florida. So,
yes. And up until now, this summer, you were slammed busy.
Yes, the schools division was quite busy this summer.
Yeah, you have had a lot going on. Well, we are glad that you made time for us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. Well, Hunter, we usually start, before we dig in to the episode, with everybody says what they've been reading lately. I'll give you a minute to think about that. Tanya, how about you?
Well, Mitchell got me started on John Le Carre.
Are you liking it?
Yes, I am. And I've like moved way beyond Mitchell now. And I think I'm on book 4 of 8 of the George Smiley books. I just keep reading. I'm reading it like it's a little omnibus or something. I just keep buying the next one and reading. And so that's really the majority of the reading that I've done. I'm listening to this book on called The Trouble with Goats and Sheep. That is
sounds it's Paul.
Right up my alley.
I don't know, but I heard about it on a podcast and I thought, well, this sounds interesting. And the narrator is so good. It's about these 2 little 10-year-old girls, and they're searching for God on their avenue in their summer break. And it's just so The Trouble with Goats and Sheep. It's really the parable,
it's not actual
not
goats
a farm.
And sheep. Yes.
It's literally based in England on a little avenue in the 1970s. But the narrator is so good with those little 10-year-old voices. And it's probably the best audiobook narration that I've ever
really
listened to, because I'm not a big fan of audiobooks.
How long is the book?
The Trouble with Goats and Sheep? I don't know. I've been listening a while. I don't know, because I didn't buy the book because I wasn't really all that interested in it because I didn't know anything about it. And I generally don't like their choices. But for some reason, I don't know why I thought, well, I'll just try this because I have all these Audible credits. And I'm really glad I did. I'm not at the end, so I can't tell you if it's going to be great. But so I'm not doing any I finished the How to Think Like Shakespeare. I did finish that. So I haven't picked up anything else that's actually intellectual. It's just all about I'm learning
John
how
Le
to be a
Carre.
spy.
Yeah, see, Mitchell convinced me to listen to the first book too, and I told him this morning that it was, as far as fluff goes, it was fine.
Yeah,
that was
That's
my
what it
review of that.
It's fluff.
Yeah, but I decided, instead of trying to pursue the second book in the George Smiley series, I picked up a book called A Bold Return to Giving a Darn. It's actually got a different word. The last word's a different word. But it's I think his name's Will Harris. And it's fascinating because it's a guy who turned from industrial farming to what is now termed regenerative farming 25, 30 years ago. And it's a fascinating story because basically it's like all the experts told me that what I was going to be doing was wrong and scientifically made no sense. But he said, common sense told me I needed to do it. And it's just it's a fascinating story about the guy willing to step out and go, what my father, because the farm's been in his family for generations, and what his great grandfather and his grandfather did, he said they were doing it right. And my father went, he bought the industrial theories. And he said, and I farmed that way my entire life until I was in my 40s, and I realized this isn't working. And but everybody was telling him that what he was doing wasn't going to work. And I just, for what we're going to talk about, I thought it was a great parallel. And
that is really interesting. But is he able to make a living?
oh yeah, he's one of the largest farms in South Georgia.
Has he sold out
now-
to any of those corporate people?
But he is clear that he was able to do it because at the time he carried no debt. And so
Right.
his cash flow took a major hit
he was able to-
until his farm was able to recover from what he would say was being addicted to chemicals and fertilizers. But then he was able to, now, I mean, I think he's built his own processing facility that he's got the USDA inspection. So he's doing his own butchering. His big thing is being hyper local. Like you don't need to be a national conglomerate to produce good food.
Right.
And
In fact, you're probably producing better food not being a national conglomerate.
right. And he made this fascinating point that when farmers had to sell directly to the consumer, they were concerned about making the best quality food. Whereas when they just send it to the commodities market, they're looking for something that's at least passable. And I just, the analogy is education. I think, when you go to homeschool, like you're looking directly at your child and you want the best thing for that child. And you may not be doing things according to the science, right? But you're concerned about that child. And as such, you are going to give them the best education that child can get.
I think you
great.
are jumping the gun.
I am kind of jumping the gun because Hunter hasn't talked, but I thought just the parallels were just screaming at me as I was reading his book this weekend. So
In your chicken tie.
and my chicken tie.
I
That's
need
right.
some more eggs, FYI. We've eaten all 12 eggs in no time. That's how good they are.
Yeah, our listeners need to know that Tanya normally goes through like a dozen eggs once a month, and so
Yeah, and I just bought eggs, and now I need more eggs right when the chickens aren't hatching eggs.
laying
Or
eggs.
laying
And
eggs,
molting
sorry.
season.
It's molting season. But I've got some eggs. I can bring you some eggs.
perks.
I taught with someone who went to that farm that you're talking about and stayed the weekend there in South West
Really?
Georgia. Yeah.
So you can
Yeah, I think they have like an inn or something that you can stay for the weekend and then kind of walk you around the farm and explain kind of what the book. I think they heard about it from a podcast that he did or something like that. So
wow.
You should do that.
Yeah.
Go visit.
I need. Oh, go visit.
Yeah.
You
go
and
visit.
Sarah, you could just have a weekend.
We could. We just went to a beef day last week at a local farm. So we get our fair share of going around and seeing stuff. Yeah, that's, I don't know, South Georgia. That's a hike.
it's a great state though.
It's a great state. This side of the table, Georgia people.
That's right.
That's a cool connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. What have you been reading?
So I've been reading the 3-volume set of Shelby Foot's Civil War
That's
history.
on my list.
It is incredible, but you have to be committed to it. It is certainly not something that you're going to pick up and read here and there.
right.
It is phenomenal. So Shelby Foot was born in Mississippi and was a novelist before he kind of decided to do this history, and really decided it because his publisher came to him and said, "Hey, write a short history." And
A short history.
exactly, and literally 20 years later, and 3,000 pages.
Yeah, it's a good thing he was writing about America, which is a young country. He'd still be at it probably if he were writing about a European country.
Yeah, so it's about 1,000 pages per year, essentially. But it's phenomenal. He writes like a novelist, and the characters that they're real people, but he just portrays them like a novel. It's really good.
You know that book that we published of essays that Tracy Lee Simmons wrote on being civilized?
Yes.
There is an interview in there with Shelby Foot that you should read now that you're actually in the middle of his. It's very interesting.
I'll have to give that a read, but I'm in the middle of Vicksburg right now. So That's right.
Wow.
It's interesting because I didn't learn a whole bunch about the Civil War. So obviously I know who ultimately wins it, but I don't necessarily know.
Spoiler.
Right. I don't necessarily know.
You are from Georgia. Are you sure you want to say wins it?
Well, I'm not going to go there. But I don't know who wins the individual battles. So I am still kind of on the edge of my seat.
Right.
Some of them I know, but not all of them. So it's
plus the characters.
Right.
We don't know necessarily all the characters because Foot goes so deeply into it.
You can tell he's been to the battlefields, has stood there, looked at this hill, and it's really good. And he writes some scenes like the scene before Stonewall Jackson's last battle. It's really gut wrenching. He's like with his family for a week and a half, and Foot says it's like the best time he's ever had in war. It's like just so it's really good.
Oh,
I'd like to read the part how he deals with Appomattox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not there yet, but I'll let you know.
Let me know.
It sounds very human. It's not just like
because he was a novelist
of the history.
Right. Yeah, he's not focused on big causes or themes or big ideas. It is what happened and telling the story of what happened. And it's remarkable to see how much war has changed. I mean, Paul and I have talked about this in the office of, these generals didn't know who they were facing or how many they were facing. And so they, like McClellan at the beginning of the war, thinks, Lee's got double what he has, in terms of soldiers, and he has half. Right. And so he doesn't attack, and just that would never happen today because of satellites and recon. So yeah, it is wonderful.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's so wonderful to get that immersed in a book.
It is.
It's kind of rare when you just have that rush of when you're reading.
I haven't gotten to all the good stuff in Georgia yet, so I'm anxious to get to towards the end of the war that happens.
That's right.
Oh, that's fun.
Leading up to Appomattox. I forgot I read Julius Caesar. I have read Julius Caesar. Just very recently because we're making a challenge for our fourth graders to memorize 3 soliloquies from it, and I had to make them a little workbook. So I thought I should read the whole play so I actually know the context of what's happening before and after. It had been a while since I've read Shakespeare. It was interesting.
Yeah, and was there any connection since you had just finished the Shakespeare book? The How to Read?
Oh, How to Read? No.
Yeah.
No, How to Think Like Shakespeare.
How to Think Like Shakespeare.
No connection at all. Really, How to Think Like Shakespeare is more about education.
Okay.
And the education that Shakespeare had.
I see. Okay. Didn't help you read Shakespeare.
It did not.
Well, on to today's topic. We're going to discuss, are parents qualified to homeschool their children? We talk to a lot of families. People call us or we meet them at conferences. They're trying to decide about homeschooling and they're wondering, can I do this? Do I have what it takes? Should I be doing this or should I leave it to a school? So that's what we're going to talk about. And Tanya, I want to start with you. Is it possible to homeschool all the way through high school without having the relevant degrees for that?
It wasn't for me. I don't, maybe some people are, I think it would be more possible for Paul to do than me. I couldn't have done upper level math or science and done any kind of justice to my children. I would have been really struggling to teach it. And so I had to outsource that. But everything else I could have done. And I don't know, when you say relevant degrees, you mean like degrees in those particular subjects? I mean, nobody's going to have all those degrees, right?
Definitely. Or maybe even a teaching degree.
A teaching degree doesn't really teach content. And so I don't think a teaching degree really is going to help at all with homeschooling.
Okay.
I do think the more you know, obviously, the better teacher you're going to be. But for me, I just learned it as we went. Would I have been qualified to homeschool when I decided to do it? No. I mean, not if you're going to say that, what did I know about Latin? Nothing. What did I know about classical history? Nothing. But when your children are young, you can certainly move faster than they do, and their material is much easier. And so that makes you successful. But at some point, you do have to decide, am I going to teach algebra or am I going to give it to somebody who actually knows how to teach algebra? Could I do it? not and teach everything else, because I would have had to have worked probably 6 hours to get ready to teach them for a week. It would have taken me that. And so I just didn't have the bandwidth or the brain power to do it. So I guess some people can't, but I'm always shocked when people want to use the online academy for literature. And I'm thinking, but that's so easy. Or history, just read, and then you've got the same information your children have and you can teach it. So it just fascinates me that people feel comfortable with math and science and not those other things. So, we're all different. I think you could have done it because you've got a well-rounded education.
Well, that's the whole goal in a liberal arts education, right? I would have to brush up on some things.
Well, sure.
But
your brushing up would be, mine would have been literally having to relearn. And there is no way I could have gotten to pre-cal.
Right. But I think homeschooling kindergarten through 8th grade is a very different thing than homeschooling 9th through 12th grade.
Yes.
And I think my mom would have said the same thing when she started homeschooling. She has said, like, she's like, I taught you everything I knew and more. I taught you stuff I didn't even know because I either I'd forgotten it, hadn't learned it, and as she's going through what she's teaching us, she's learning alongside.
Right. Which is so doable.
Which is doable. But once you get to that 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, it gets harder.
You've got to really think about college prep at that point. And if you've done a good job in K to 8, your students will be able to do it. You will have given them all the skills that they need to succeed. But I felt like my children needed some adult who actually knew the subject.
Mm-hmm. Is that when you started doing cottage school?
No, they were in the cottage school from the very beginning with Cheryl from 4th grade and 2nd grade all the way through. So whatever we didn't get done in the cottage school, I could do at home until high school. And at that point, they had, at that point we were in school 3 days a week, but I still had tutors for my kids for math.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you think about it, I was just thinking about this, Hunter and I were talking this morning about one-room schoolhouses. And
boy, what if y'all, this is the second time something's come up about you all talking in the office.
The war.
You and I have been, what have we been doing? Working.
A large part of our job is talking, as we're doing right now.
That's what Michelle said to me once. She said, the reason schools division people are salespeople is that we chat a lot.
Yes.
So obviously our office is going to be full of chat because we're people.
And speaking of chat, another thing Hunter and I have talked about
oh my gosh.
is visualization, which we need to talk with you about how we read books.
Yeah. You missed it, Tanya.
Before we conclude, we need to get to that.
I listened to it. I'm just shocked.
I want to know how. Okay, we'll do that at the end. I'll be a little dessert for the end of the episode. But we were talking about one-room schoolhouses, and I was just sitting here thinking about like a homeschooler actually has it's less of a burden than your typical one-room schoolhouses were, right? Like you would have had more students.
Oh yeah,
in a one-room schoolhouse, which means in more levels that you're trying to do, and so it's actually a lower bar to be able to teach your own kids than even what the folks that we expected to be able to teach all levels.
Right.
Because you just have a less that you have to get done in a day with however many students you have.
That's true. Can you think of scenarios where someone really shouldn't homeschool outside of maybe if they have the option to outsource for something like an upper level subject that they just really don't feel qualified to do? Are there other occasions where it just wouldn't be appropriate?
The one thought that comes to my mind is at a homeschool convention, I had a woman come up to me who, I think she was if I remember correctly, I think she was a single mother and she was working and she was trying to homeschool at the same time. And while I think it's laudable, like you're trying to give the best thing you can to your kids. I was like, I don't know that you've got the time to get this done.
And that's a sad thing when you want to give it to your child, but your circumstances don't allow that. And so that would be what I would say is that if it's making you miserable and it's affecting your family life because you're trying to work homeschool and do all the household things that have to be done to keep the household together, then it's probably not the best thing to do. If it's making everybody crazy and you're unhappy, you shouldn't be unhappy homeschooling. Now, I'm not going to say it's not stressful, and we had some really bad days. But overall, at the end of that, maybe not that day, but very shortly after, I never thought we shouldn't be doing this or this is too much. I would feel like a failure many times, but I never questioned the validity of what we were doing or that we could. I felt like we could get it done, and that's the other thing. And you said that at the beginning, that what I was giving them wasn't perfect, but it was better than any alternative that I had for them. It meant we were very poor because I couldn't work and do that. And so we gave up a lot. We still pay for some of those decisions that we made, but I would not change it. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I'd just do it better this time.
Hunter, I think you would have an interesting perspective on sort of if somebody says particularly that folks shouldn't homeschool because they don't have the qualifications. I think you have an interesting background with regards to educational qualifications, and like, what is that? What comes to your mind when somebody says that?
Yeah, well, like you were saying earlier about, teacher programs or, a teaching degree certification, in a lot of ways, they make you less qualified to teach, especially classically, in the sense that, and I think there's kind of two misconceptions of people have about those who are certified, quote unquote, by the state to teach. The first is that they are subject material experts, and that's just not the case. Most of the time you have a few classes. So I was in social studies ed. That meant, I had some history classes.
I'm sorry, you were in what?
Social studies ed, social studies education.
Okay. Is it social studies education or socialized education?
Social studies education was the degree.
That's what I needed. Okay.
Well, they're kind of one and the same, but that's socialized education is essentially what they taught. So I'm one and the same in that regard. But
I've never heard of that.
That's social studies education. Well, I mean, social studies is the big, instead of classical studies and history, it's just social studies. So you learn
social studies.
It's basically sociology with some history there at the end in high school. Generally speaking, at least that's my experience in Georgia. And I think that's pretty much the case
probably
countrywide. But so the first is that you're a subject expert, and that's just not the case. You take maybe a few, history classes in my example, but that's about it. And you have to go and relearn all the content. In fact, one of the biggest complaints among me and my cohort was we learn no content. So how am I supposed to teach if I don't know the content? And the answer was always a good teacher can teach any content, which, is just wild. But so that's number one. The second is that teaching certifications give you some sort of special knowledge or insight into how children develop. And so exactly how children, where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to be learning in a way that, a parent doesn't. And also, that's just not true. In fact, most of the time, you're a 22, 3, 4, 5-year-old coming out of college and you don't have any kids. You've never really been around kids. And all of a sudden,
you're supposed to be the expert on children. You're supposed to be the expert
on how they develop. And so, so if we think about those two misconceptions, I think the parents, by not having those, or understanding that there's no special knowledge or insight that these people who are state certified have, and the one thing that they don't have that you do as a parent is you care about your child infinitely more than any teacher, school administrator, principal, school district employee ever could. And so even if you don't know the material, like Tanya was saying, as well, or really at all, because you care, that's going to incentivize you to put in the work that you need to in order to understand the material in a way that, if I'm teaching a class full of 25, I just simply don't have to have that same, the stakes aren't as high in that regard. And so in a lot of ways, you're more qualified than anyone coming out of a teacher certification program, because what they're taught in a teacher certification program is basically like a coach. It's creating an environment that your students can create their own learning. And so that's what you learn. You learn how to create that environment, and then like a coach and, with the game plan, and then you kind of call the plays as you go, but then it's on the players and, go get them. And then if anything goes wrong, the coach is to blame. So the teacher is to blame, but that's really what you're taught. And especially when we think about, a teacher driven and led classroom or, homeschool, that's just, the antithesis of that.
So what I'm hearing you say is that if the homeschoolers worry about being prepared is that they don't know the content, fundamentally, they're probably at the same level as a certified teacher.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you would ask Michelle would say not only did she not know the content of phonics in early education, but she knew, whole word.
She knew the wrong thing.
She knew the wrong thing. So even if you do know, the content, it's very, it could even be misguided in some instances. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's so helpful because so many parents, I would imagine, think they're completely behind when it comes to any sort of credentials, and they look at their peers.
Because you have to. There's so much to teach, and like phonics and reading for me were scary. It wasn't scary for my first child because he just read and he could spell. But then the second one came along and I was like, okay, read. And it didn't happen. And he couldn't spell. And, I got Cheryl Lowe to help me a lot because, and that's the other thing is you don't have to do this alone. You can do it in a group, or you can do it, you find a mentor, find somebody to help you. She helped me succeed and gave me the confidence that I needed to do what I really felt like I wasn't qualified to do.
What I love about that example is that it would probably be so helpful if I was trying to do this without the resources we have here to know I'm not alone. And not only that, it's actually better if I maybe try to do this within a group of friends.
Absolutely.
Because I know you talk to people all the time who are trying to start things in their community or looking for people in their area who are doing things like they would like to do. And there are resources everywhere to them.
There are now. It's such a different world than it was 20 years ago. Thank goodness. And then now there's the online academy too, which I didn't have access to, but I would have done that.
Right. Yeah. Especially
because then you got a live teacher actually teaching your child.
Right. And the sort of vast majority of those offerings is as the students get older. Right. Because that's precisely,
I didn't need it.
That's precisely where the help
in those young years. A lot of people do. You've got classes for young students, but I really didn't need that. And I wouldn't have been able to pay for it. But when it came to the responsibility of math and science for my children who are going to college, I had to pay for it because it was vital that they have it. And it was my responsibility to make sure they got it.
That's helpful. I keep thinking about when you were dispelling those myths and how, well, it's really helpful. I didn't know either of those things. I think it's really helpful, if someone who's thinking about homeschooling might tell that to a friend or just be talking about school options in their community. And someone says, well, how do you think you're qualified to do that?
But, people do say that to you.
Right. That's what I mean.
Like they would encounter homeschoolers. Right. People would look at me like I had three heads. Like what does qualify you to do this? And Hunter said, I know my children. I knew my children. I knew the school system. That was my only option. And I knew that I could do better than that. It didn't mean I was going to do a great job, but it meant that I was going to do better. It meant that my children would be reading before they were in the third grade, which is what was not happening in my school system. And I just needed something better. I think schools start the majority of the time because parents or grandparents are looking for a better option for their child. How many times do we see schools start because somebody wants a better education for their child than they can get, and they want that option, so they gather some people around them, and they start, and all of a sudden you've got a school.
And even teachers, if you think about what a teacher has to handle, 20, 25 kids, sometimes more in a classroom, they're having to worry about differentiated learning in most states. And so they're worried about, those who have accommodations in a kind of middle of the road, and then, the students that are excelling. So they're really having to write 3 different lesson plans for all of those students. They're having to, reach out to parents to make sure that we're on the same page. If there's any discipline issues, reaching out to parents with that, making conferences. I mean, there's so much that a teacher, even the most caring teacher, has to do. And I have to do it, again, over the course of, 25 students and in 25 people's lives. And so even as a parent, those numbers they're shrunk down for you. It's your kid and or your children, and you don't have to worry about, this person didn't have lunch today, so I need to figure out if that's a problem at home, and how can I, what's on teachers' plates is so much greater than what you have as a parent, that, in terms of teaching, that I think that hopefully relieves the burden off a lot of parents as well of, you not only are you qualified because you know your child better than those teachers, but you also, in terms of bandwidth, and I love what you say frequently about, if you don't do the dishes that night, if you have to, you just don't do them that night. And I think that's really helpful too of, here's your priorities, if education is really important, then, don't do the dishes that night. But you have that ability to do that. And what you're concerned about is your family. Well, guess what? Those teachers have families as well that they're concerned. So all those concerns that you have, they also have, and some. And so I think helping people see that, we're asking a lot of teachers in the classroom, and that your child, as a result, is going to, they're not getting the top-notch education in a lot of instances that you can provide at home. And so, like you were saying, you really can do better.
And I also think there's a lot of, I was thinking about, you talking about parent-teacher conferences, and I'm like, homeschooling, you just know, right? You're the parent, you're the teacher. But also, I think there's a lot of efficiencies that a homeschooler gets as well, as far as because I'm thinking about in our classrooms where we advocate that the Latin teacher be the homeroom teacher in the elementary years, because there's so much synergy crossover that happens, because you've got this Latin word that's got a derivative in the literature and that sort of stuff, and that teacher knows what's going on in both classrooms. But when that teacher's the parent, there's even more, because the parent's involved in every aspect of that child's life. And so you can drive home lessons in a way that a teacher can't, because you're in that child's life 24/7. And I mean, I think I've said before how irate I was when I realized that my mother, when she homeschooled us, made sure every game in the household was educational. I got so mad about that. But also, I remember we were always done with school by lunchtime.
Right.
Because what was I doing in the afternoon? Playing games that were educational, that were fun. I mean, so I think that's also something that we forget, is that when a kid goes off to school and comes back and comes into the home, I mean, it's a lot of work for the parent to figure out, what was my child doing at school that I can reinforce. Just teach it yourself. Right. I mean,
it comes with its own set of problems. School comes with its own set of problems.
I will say one of the aspects of being in the school, though, that teachers get, that homeschool parents may struggle a little bit more with, is that sense of order and discipline.
Yes.
If you have 25 kids, you have no choice but to, address discipline issues or be orderly. And, we see the outcomes of, classrooms that aren't that, and teachers are miserable in that circumstance if they don't, have an orderly classroom. And so, good seasoned teachers that last typically are the ones that have orderly classrooms, and that's why they last. And so, one thing that homeschool parents, because they're not necessarily in the classroom, to just remember that order does matter, even with one student, that routines and procedures and all of those still really matter, even in that setting of just one. And so, but being cognizant of, that's a potential hardship that I'm going to have to, work through kind of ahead of time, is something that if you're thinking about it ahead of time, then, once you get there, you can, remind yourself constantly, be orderly. We need routines. And I know that's something that you've talked a lot about. But
did you know I let my children do their work in their pajamas?
Yes.
Did you, Tanya?
That.
Yes.
But you had a regular start time, didn't you?
I did have a regular start time, but I didn't make them dress.
Yeah. I mean,
So I think school would have been, if I had it to do again, I'd make them dress because I think it puts a bit more seriousness. Maybe not. Maybe it didn't make a difference. They were going to throw things at each other, whether they had pajamas on or regular clothes.
we just made their regular clothes their pajamas.
Easier in the mornings.
So much easier.
Maybe I'll try that.
You know, I mean, when they were 6 and 7, it works. Right. You know, so.
Yeah. So then they don't have to dress to go to school.
That's right. Yeah. It made life a lot easier. Just wake up, brush your teeth, eat breakfast, get in the car.
Fewer points of resistance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then when you get more.
We all pick our battles.
Yes,
right.
we do. We all have to pick our battles.
Yes.
I would like to talk about visualization if we're going to wrap up. Okay. Tanya, do you visualize the images as you read?
I couldn't believe you don't. I don't understand. You know what I do even? I take it even further because you know more than anybody that I'm not a logistical person. Like Paul has been drawing me diagrams for years to explain things, and somebody else will be trying to explain something to me, and then he'll say, hang on, I know how she does this, and then he could draw it out and I could get it. So that's who I am. So when I'm reading a book, especially like one of these spy novels, and they're describing a house or something, and it's going to be important, I really worry about it because I feel like I need to picture it to be able to picture it, and I struggle with all of that description.
You can't just automatically like architect it in your mind.
Well, a lot of things I can and do, but when it comes to something like the layout of a house, I really concentrate because I need to be able to see them in those rooms.
So you work to do it.
I do, but I do it naturally anyway. But I have to work to do it. Matters enough to me that I have to work to do it with something that's logistical that I'm not going to understand. But to say, people walking down the street, absolutely. I pictured that street. I've pictured those houses.
Okay. So this is why I brought Hunter on. Hunter, tell her how you read.
Yeah, I read exactly like Paul does. Like I don't visualize
You have
anything.
No picture in your head as you're reading.
When people complain about movies because they ruin the character because they picture the character differently, I love that there's movie characters because that gives me a picture when I'm reading, and I don't have to like think about the picture as I'm reading, even to the point where Paul was talking about Lord of the Rings. And when I read Lord of the Rings, exactly what Paul was saying. I read apparently like the first letter and like some letters in the name. So when I got to the end of Lord of the Rings, I didn't get as much out of it because I was mixing up characters because they have
because you didn't have a picture of them in your head until the movies.
Well, I haven't seen the movies, but I need to watch the movies.
You need to watch the movies, and then the picture will be there.
And there are some stories where like some of the things you visualize are really like the main point of the, like, have you ever read The Dutch House?
No.
It's beautiful. It's all about, Tom Hanks narrates it. It's a wonderful audiobook. Anyway, and it's about these siblings who grow up in this really fantastic home, and it's their relationship to the home. And
is that Ann Patchett? Okay. I like that.
I could be wrong, but I think so.
Okay.
I think so. And I can't imagine reading that book and not picturing the ornate ceilings. And it was, the house was a character.
It's just something I do.
Right.
But you all, like, did you know it was odd?
No, that's why it was so surprising to me when Martin was talking about like visualizing everything he read. And that's why I was just shocked by this.
Is it odd?
Here's what to visualize. I think
not to visualize it. Maybe it's more. I mean, here we are as table of four.
I think Hunter and I are probably in the minority. Yeah. And in fact, in our conversation we were having in the office,
another one,
Caitlin brought up the possibility of aphantasia, where there are people that actually can't visualize. So the idea of the mind's eye, they like. One researcher, I listened to this podcast on it, and the researcher was like, I started looking into this because when I saw that phrase, the mind's eye, she's like, I had no idea where that would come from, how that would even be possible, what that's talking about. And she realized that she has aphantasia. She just can't visualize anything. But I think Hunter and I agree that we can visualize, which is when we are reading a book, we just don't naturally do it.
Wow.
And
I see the fields that the elves are tramping over.
Yeah, no, I absolutely
But interestingly, my friend Wendell Berry, one time, so, he doesn't do TV, doesn't do movies, doesn't do computers.
Meaning he doesn't interact with it personally? Like he doesn't have a TV?
Have any of that stuff.
Okay.
He doesn't, none of that stuff. Won't let his books be turned into movies because it would ruin who the characters are to him. Mm-hmm. And so one time he was at our house and we had been to see Lord of the Rings movies because, and my boys loved them because Martin made it part of their class. When Nick was in the 7th grade, Martin was, I don't even know what he was teaching them. But anyway, that was like, he said, you read the book and then I'll take you to the movie. Mm-hmm. And so when it came out, we all went to the theater together with Martin chaperoning his class. And so then I bought a visual book of pictures from the movies. What do you call those?
Oh.
Anyway.
Visual book.
It's just like a coffee table kind of book. With
Yes,
a bunch
that's what
of
I'm looking for. A
pictures.
coffee table book. It was just pictures from the movies. And so I was typing something for Wendell and he was waiting. It was a letter or something. I don't even remember what. And he was sitting in the wing chair beside my desk. And I looked over and he'd picked that book up and I thought, oh no. So he's just flipping through. I just keep typing and I'm getting more and more nervous. I think, it's not that I was trying to hide my life from him, but I thought, here I am with a coffee table book from a movie that's just full of pictures of the movie and nothing else. So finally, all of a sudden he goes, so that's what an orc looks like. So I just thought just now, does he visualize when he reads? I'll have to ask him.
I'd love to know because even I think I don't know if it's in Jayber Crow, but at least in one of Wendell's books, I've opened it up and there's like a diagram of the town or of the
oh yes,
and I've always looked at those and gone, why in the world would this be in a book?
Oh, it needs to be. That's the kind of thing that confuses me. That I look back at those diagrams. I look back at maps to see where things are in relation.
His family trees are helpful. I know that's not exactly a visual, but some of those things are very helpful.
That could be very helpful. But insofar as like knowing where the river is or this or the other, I really don't because a good author also is going to like make clear when it says they head to the east. Well, they're also going to say they head to the east where Bree is or something, right? Like they're also going to inform me as I'm going along.
Well, they are, but stuff. I feel like you're missing some things.
I mean, I very well could be. I
feel like I'm missing something, but I get annoyed at descriptive paragraphs because I know I'm not going to picture it. And so it just seems like fluff to me.
I think that's amazing.
I know it's not fluff, but it feels like fluff to me because I don't visualize.
So the war book you're reading was really exciting and engaging to you. How?
Right.
What was exciting? If you're not picturing a battle and blood and stress, what are you?
Yeah, so
why are you excited?
That's why I mentioned the way he characterizes the generals and stuff and the humanity of them, because that's in fact when he starts describing this, cavalry went up down this hill. I just don't.
Check out.
I kind of check out.
You intellectually are aware of this concept that the cavalry is going down the hill,
right?
But you're not picturing horses charging down a particular hill,
right?
You just conceptually know.
Don't you
that
think
horses are charging down the hill?
You're participating less than you could be?
Yes, they are.
Maybe we're the Aristotelians and they're the Platonists.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I like I said, I do feel like I probably am missing out. I know that there are books like Lord of the Rings that I felt like I got to the end, and when I reread it again, I will
watch the movies first, and then they'll be in your head, maybe.
Right. And I've seen clips of the movie, and so those characters that I knew, they stuck with me, but some of the others did not. And you were talking about maps and stuff. I have to have a map because there's no way I'm visualizing it without a map. And so especially with the battles. But I did just go to Perryville here in Kentucky, the battlefield. And that actually really helped me because I kind of got a grasp of the hills and the fields. And when he says that they, jumped over this fence. Like that means there's an actual fence there. Like that fence looked like something, and the grass was tall, and there was a cornfield, and like seeing all that at the battlefield, helped me because I just don't visualize it.
There's also like a different extreme to this. So I was asking a friend about this this weekend in a car. I was like, "How do you read?" And he said his preferred way of reading is having the book in front of him and listening to it, a narrator at the same time. And he says it is like experiencing a movie for him, because he's listening to the words, he's seeing the words on the page,
but he's also visualizing.
He's visualizing. That helps him visualize to such a degree. He said it's like watching a movie.
I wondered if an audiobook, so even with an audiobook, you're not visualizing?
Not at all.
So you're not visualizing with your eyes or your ears. You're just not visualizing.
Correct. Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether I'm hearing those words come through my ears or whether they're just coming through the reading on the page. I just don't visualize. I
don't know that I could read and stop myself from visualizing.
Right. Yeah, see, that's wild. Are you good with faces?
I'm not, because I'm awful with faces.
I'm decent at faces.
I'm not good at faces. I can remember names, but I'm not good with faces. I never remember them. I can meet you and I won't remember.
I mean, my wife would absolutely say I'm unobservant to the nth degree, right? Like, I can walk in the house and she could have cleaned everything and I may or may not notice.
That's a mistake.
I don't disagree. But also I think that speaks to sort of like the degree to which I prioritize a visualization of something, right? Like, it's not like I'm looking around the house and going, oh, this is where this stuff is. And so then when it shifts, Is
there anybody else in our office who doesn't visualize? Have y'all asked?
We'll have to take a poll.
Yeah, we're going to have to ask.
I'm just shocked about this. I mean, when you said it, and then you were so shocked when Martin said he did visualize. I was like, what is going on here?
What?
I leave for a week.
Well, Martin said he hears voices. Like he hears the characters' voices.
Yes, he did say
and that flabbergasted
Do I
me.
hear the characters' voices? I don't think so. I don't hear different voices, I don't think.
Yeah, Martin said he did. And so for him, I think he's much more similar to my other friend that says it's like a movie to him. Who's, like it's a whole experience he's getting as he reads the page. I just don't get it.
Am I surprised that Martin hears voices in his head?
None of us are. No.
No, he's not here to defend himself.
That's okay.
Next week. Well, great discussion on qualifications for homeschooling your children and how we read and how that affects our lives. Oh, thanks for joining us, and we will be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.